Yeah, my haircut is long. I mean, my hair is long. I want to cut it.
You don't
Usually,
like it?
no, I don't like long hair. I usually cut. So basically, I keep my long hair for 7 months, and then I would cut it all out. It usually is my habit like that.
Gotcha.
Okay, how you been? It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. I've been good. I've been super busy, of course, which is, I'm busy with good things. So certainly no complaints. How about you?
It's great. I have been interviewing amazing people. Thank you so much for helping me out during the interview. When I was beginning to do an interview, I didn't even know how to do it. I was so uneasy to do it. Now I'm comfortable.
Yay!
Thank you so much for that.
You learn
Because,
by doing.
yes, and but you're the first one who like reached us like maybe you should yeah, what was it? We can try. So we try. Right. The camera wasn't that, that good, but um right.
Oh, that's my doorbell. I'm glad that didn't happen during the interview. Hopefully they just go away.
It's okay. Um, she had she had.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Today we will be interviewing. Her name is Triffany. She has been on my YouTube channel before, and I'm gonna be interviewing her on parenting because I'm a young dude or a young guy, and I have seen so many people who go on parenting. But for example, my sister, she's a mother of two, and she's struggling. I think that in my head, I'm not ready to have a kid, but I do want to have a family, right? But I feel like what is the necessary step to be able to become a parent and to raise a kid? But before you answer that question, can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And Johnny, I want to thank you for having me on here again. My name is Triffany, just like Tiffany with an R, and I am a certified professional life coach. I help strong women tame their inner hot mess. And that includes myself. No one is immune to the human experience. And yeah, Johnny and I have talked at length about a lot of the things that I try to live my life by, really embracing failure and missteps and obstacles as not only an essential part, but even with the right tools, hopefully an enjoyable part of a journey. And we're applying that to parenting today. So I'm super excited to be here.
Okay, thank you so much. My journey, I guess I haven't talked to the audience. Sometimes I don't want to do the interview, because sometimes I have, personal problem that I have with other things that I don't want to, because I'm not brave yet to tell the world yet what I'm going through, but it's okay. But because, it's not easy all the time, but I do want to do interviews because it's one of my passions. But so, how can we as people raise our kids the way? How can we raise them efficiently? Because we live in a world that is governed by system, right? We live in a world that is be able, what was it, by society, and push you and to live you. Because one of my mission is also to impact the special education, because I think that the world is so much in thinking that success and all. We talked about this before about things and stuff like that. And so, how can we prepare our or to raise kids if we're not prepared yet? So how can we take this step?
Well, you bring up a couple different layers in the cons or in the idea of parenting, right? When you very first started out, you started about talking about your own readiness, and then you talk about the society that's built on systems, and then there's an extra layer of even having potentially special needs issues, and those special needs could be on the parenting side too. You might have differently abled parents who have a child without those same issues, right? Like there's so many things that are nuanced in how we look at parenting. The number one thing that I always like to tell people about parenting, at least in terms of preparation, nobody can really prepare you for your journey in parenting. I would love to be able to say, you know, do these 3 things and everything's going to be great. But the fact of the matter is, every kid is different. Every situation is different. And the way you think you're going to show up for your child is different. So if I could just take each layer at a time, let's do that. Let's talk about personal readiness. I love the fact that you were so honest and just said you want a family someday, but you're not really ready. And I think one of the things that we kind of do because of the systemization that you mentioned in our culture as Westerners is we kind of have sort of a logistical next step. You know, you've been dating for so long, the next step is to get married, and you've been married for so long, so the next logical step is to have kids. And if we're not really evaluating our readiness for the kind of selflessness it takes to have and rear a child successfully, then we're not really prepared to meet the child where they are. Because the one thing that is not systematized in Western culture is human behavior. We are all the crazy variable. All of us are going to be, you know, completely different, and all of us are going to be completely different in a whole new context. So number one, I would say, evaluate with pure honesty your absolute readiness to do this. It's okay to be selfish while you're figuring out who you are. It's okay to be selfish while you're figuring out who you are as a married couple, or even just boyfriend and girlfriend. Take the time you need with those things to figure out how they're developing you, what your learning curve is for those things. And don't ever, ever think that a child is going to fix a relationship or, you know, push you into the next level of adulthood. Like you don't rely on these things out here to change what's going on in here. It goes the other way. You change what's going on here, and then you embrace that outside world. So before I move on from that, am I making sense? What's coming up for you as I mention all of that?
Yeah, it makes lots of sense. Like, to be able to, well, you said we will never be ready, you know, to have a kid, right? Because the thing is, I have experience with my sister. She's having difficulty to be able to raise her kids. So I don't want to be in that predicament to be able to say, you know, I need to be ready for that in the future. So
right. Well, raising a kid is never easy. It's rewarding. It's beautiful. It also touches on a lot of the things inside of us that we really need a lot of practice at. We need a lot of practice at patience. We need a lot of practice at forgiveness. We need a lot of practice at empathy and compassion and kindness. And kids will push all of those buttons, not because they mean to and not because it's personal, but because they are developing. Their brains are underdeveloped. Their bodies are underdeveloped. They have zero coping mechanisms, and they're really relying on you as a human being to have developed as much of that in yourself as you can, not only so that you can teach it, but that you're modeling it. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see parents make is they expect better behavior out of their children than they're willing to give of themselves. And that's a really tricky thing, because we have the obligation to teach our children how to behave in this world. And without the introspection it takes to make sure we're living up to that same standard, we just end up in this cycle of no, don't, no, don't, no, don't. And kids don't learn that way. And when they're diminished that way in a very long span of time, it begins to have wear and tear on their self-esteem and on their ability to believe in themselves and what they're capable of doing, not just out in the world in terms of achievement, but in terms of handling and coping with their own impatience, their own feelings of hurt and angst, right? So we really want to make sure that we are the best vehicle we can be at that time. We're never going to be ready, but we can feel confident enough that we are prepared to face those obstacles head on and use them as an opportunity to make us better people first, and then parents by extension. Does that make sense?
yes, that makes very sense. And also, you also include patience and forgiveness and what was the compassion, right? And does it also include not only for kids but also as either partners or for your whatever your lovers or whatever.
Oh my gosh, yes! Johnny gets a prize! Absolutely it does. I mean, really, in all honesty, the very interconnectedness that we experience as human beings, the fact that we really cannot separate ourselves from the human experience, number one, and from each other's human experience, number two, means that we always have that opportunity to practice those things. The difference is with adults, we have a certain level of expectation. Now, whether or not people are actually willing or able to give what we expect of them, we kind of run off of some assumptions. We run off of the assumptions that people aren't going to throw knives at us when, you know, when they feel impatient, that people are pretty much going to try to drive safely and not purposefully create accidents. So we kind of run off of those assumptions when we're dealing with adults. And in a relationship, we have the ability to have full, rounded, comprehensive communication where we can say, hey, look, we're on the same team. We're trying to solve the same problem. I know that we're feeling frustrated and our patience is running thin, but we have tools that we can communicate with language that can kind of corral us in those times when we're feeling lost or confused or distanced from our partners that we don't necessarily have with children, especially when they're at a very young age, right? We are the entire onus is on us to be responsible for a tiny being's existence before they can even tell us what their needs are, except through a cry, which, you know, with patience, you do learn the differences, but that's only with patience, and it's only with the practice of really tuning into timing, routine, age and stage of development, tonality in a cry, and really even your own ability. Are you well slept? Have you been eating well? Are you and your partner fighting? Is there anything you could be misinterpreting about your child's behavior that makes you interpret it in a way that is less valuable than if you were patient and present to the moment? So I think there's a lot when we really start looking at the various facets of the human experience. We're constantly being tested, aren't we, Johnny? That compassion, that empathy, that forgiveness, that's constantly being developed within us when it gets pushed and when those buttons get pushed. I think it's really astute of you to notice that.
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I've been, you know, it's not easy when you love someone. It's not easy to give them patience. I can give you forgiveness, but I don't. It's not easy. It's like your partner's almost like a child, almost, right? Like a parenting kind of like that. But so yeah, and also I noticed over the years when you were because I do want to touch base on this too, because I noticed this a lot through all the adults, and it's very funny that you say that, you know, as we growing up, or as everyone growing up, they've been conditioned to hear the word no. So guess what happened? People don't like the word no. Well, I don't either, but I like the fact that they try. So there's one instance, right? I want to ask this guy for an interview. I remember, and I haven't told the story yet, so I want to tell the story. So I went on his live YouTube, live event, chat, whatever that thing is, and there was a woman, and she's like, because I asked him for an interview, and I keep asking, and so she's like, ask him for an interview later, and she got annoyed with that. I kept asking, and it wasn't about her, but she's like, tell the guy I want to interview block me. I was like, whoa, you don't need to do that, but it tells that we've been conditioned to hate the word no, right? And we get irritated. But over the years, I have figured out that most adults don't like no's, and irritation will come. But nothing happened in real life, or nothing happened if you don't but overcome that no in order to get what you want.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of the available practice, the opportunity for us, if we're receivers of no, and also as parents, sometimes the deliverers of no, is to understand that no is an answer to a very specific vein of questioning or a very specific need. So for instance, I always made it a practice for me. I didn't always get it right. You know, when my kids were younger, and my kids are grown, my kids are 19 and almost 18 now. So I've seen this whole trajectory of them becoming these young adults. But all along the way, my goal was to say yes as often as I could. And that meant being really super creative. That what didn't mean I was really passive or permissive. But I'll give you a perfect example. You know, Mom, can I have a cookie? Rather than no, we haven't had dinner yet, or rather than just no, the answer was yes after you've had a healthy dinner. Great. So then my kids would take the cookie and they would set it next to their plate, and they would know exactly the conditions they had available to them to solve the problem of them wanting a cookie and me wanting them to have a healthy dinner, right? So there's, whether you're receiving the no or you're delivering the no, I think a lot of times that's the opportunity that is inherent in that experience, is saying, okay, that was one little sliver. The cookie, yes or no, it's really not actually a binary option. And for you asking for the interview, it wasn't really a binary option. It was, okay, no today, but maybe tomorrow is different. And, you know, no tomorrow, but maybe it's a seasonal thing. Maybe there's a downtime in this person's schedule that I could take an opportunity in. Or maybe even if ultimately this person was going to block you and this person was going to say no, maybe the practice was just in the asking, getting used to hearing it, desensitizing yourself to it. My point being is that there's always an opportunity, especially in the stuff that makes us feel uncomfortable. And you're a perfect example of that.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was at first very uncomfortable, but but it's okay, because the thing is, I realized, because I want to be able to also teach. You know, my second mission, or my first mission is to impact the law of attraction thinking, because I think that the secret didn't teach you the social skill that you need, and the people skills, and the communication, and I think that that's missing. And I wanted to show people up front that it takes me time to get interviewed, because I really see that these interviews are negotiation, right? It's selling, and it's not always easy. It won't come right away. But also, for you, it's very interesting what you say about your kids growing up, right? And I had an image of, I don't know if your kid was rebellious. I was, right? Because I was thinking about myself, right? I was like, how do you deal with a kid who was rebellious and they don't want to do, because, you know, when I was younger, I didn't like school, right? I don't want to do the things that my mom want me to do because of the school. I don't like homework, and I was really rebellious. I got into fights, but I really felt pressure because of school, you know, because I was labeled, and I felt, because I was made fun of. I couldn't. I remember this kid. He was laughing because I couldn't spell metal to mental, because he was raised as a English speaking surroundings, and I wasn't. And well, I had. So how can you uh, help the children who rebel, or if they get to that teenage?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple different times in a child's life that they're going to be more prone to rebellion than others. And both of those times are really similar in terms of how the brain is developing. So in the ages between, I want to say, 2 and 6, there is massive brain development. The brain weight changes drastically in those years. People talk about the terrible twos, and, you know, oh, well, you know, what's his problem? Is he okay? No, he's just a toddler, or he's just 3, you know. What's really going on in the times of these massive brain weight changes is the brain, when it's growing in any capacity, and this happens in small little, you know, ways all across a child's growth, all the way into their mid-20s even. But these are the 2 periods that are really specific to this, that toddler age and then adolescence. In adolescence, you're getting a full section of your brain grow in, specifically the prefrontal cortex. And what happens anytime we face massive brain changes, the brain is always going to default to the part of itself that is the most developed. And the most developed part of itself is the defensive mechanisms way back in the back, the amygdala, that are responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. So rebellion can look those 3 ways, right? They can be an outright, no, mine, I have to, I do it. Or they could be just shutting down completely, and now you've got a non-communicative child, or you've got a kid that just will not have the talk, will not face the fear, will not do the thing, right? So when you see that in toddlerhood, you actually get kind of a sense of the coping mechanisms that you're going to need, actually, even as far along all those years later into adolescence, because now you see your child's propensity for that default coping mechanism. So number one, it's constantly understanding your child does not have a fully formed brain until somewhere between 22 and 25, depending on male or female. Your child, there is no common sense. Everything that your child needs to know is something that is learned. And all of that is coming so quickly. I mean, we're counting on life skills that will last decades and decades to kind of be in place by the first decade. So we're really asking that brain to work extra, triple, quadruple hard to remember, retain, find context, make sense of, and somehow manage all of your emotions as well. We're asking a lot. So the more you can understand that rebellion, confusion, reluctance, refusal, any of those nuanced flavors of rebellion, they're actually normal. They're painful for us as parents. We wish they didn't happen. It'd be a hell of a lot easier if we could just say, go do it, and you do it. But that is actually a normal part of a child's growth. It's a sign of healthy personal development. Kids are testing their own boundaries. And this is a really great opportunity for us as parents to say, where's my work? Where's my work in being patient? Where's my work in choosing my tone? Where's my work in modeling how anger looks and problem resolution looks when you're angry? Your kid's not going to always get it right, but you have a lot better chance of getting it right than your kid does. So again, coming back to that obstacle being the gift, when you're triggered by your child's rebellion, this is the opportunity to show them how you want it done by doing it yourself. Does that make sense? It's a bitter pill for parents to swallow.
Yeah, of course. You know, I often see it like parents are very selfish sometimes, especially Asian parents, right? I notice Asian parents are selfish because they always want to, they have high expectation of their kid to do well, right? I think that's not really, it's like I said, they don't have free will. Because I saw one of the comments on this YouTube videos and it's like, oh, since I haven't done it myself, I'll let my kids do it, live my, dream for myself. But I think that's very selfish, right? That's one of my message for the parents. I'm not a parent, but that's kind of selfish. Right.
Well, yes and no. You want to understand too. I mean, I don't want to be too critical of parents because up until this last generation of parents, we really were kind of told that as a child came in, it was a blank slate, it was like clay, and it was ours to mold. And we really kind of had the impression that our biggest responsibility as a parent was to shape our child for success. And now that we know more about behavioral psychology, we know more about child development, we know more about the brain development, cognitive differences between, genders, ages, life experiences, right? Now we know that that's actually not the case. Children do not come in blank slates. They are not ours to mold. That really, they are going to become who they are going to become. And our job as parents, that is to create a safe space for them to become that. Now, that doesn't mean you give up discipline. It doesn't mean you don't have expect, please, and thank you. It doesn't mean you don't teach them the tools they need to integrate well and safely into the society we live in. It does mean, however, that when they digress from the path you think is right for them, that they have their own obstacles and failures and things to learn from that may not have anything at all to do with you and what you want for them. So it's really, really difficult for parents to dissociate our hopes and dreams for our kids. We want the best. We never want to see them struggle. We want them to be happy always and have success in adulthood. But that may not be the path that may not be the way their path looks in the very beginning. Their path might look like struggle. It might look like depression. It might look like loneliness. It might look like arrogance. It could look like a lot of different things that are unsavory to those of us with experience. But we want to remember as parents, these kids don't have those experiences yet. These are their experiences to gain. So the more we can create a high level of emotional intelligence in ourselves and for ourselves, the more we can offer that safe space for our kids to then process those mistakes. I'll give you a perfect example. My daughter came to me. It was early adolescence. It was a junior high or so. And yeah, it was actually about 7th grade. And she came to me and she said, Mom, there's this mean girl in school. I'm like, okay, tell me about her. So she tells me a little bit about her, and yep, mean girl. A lot of the, I don't know if you've ever read the book Queen Bees and Wannabes, but, certainly a queen bee trying to tell everyone else where their right place is. So this is a tricky thing for my daughter, who is very independent, and it's tricky for her to navigate. So I'm thinking she's going to come to me like, how do I deal with the meanness of this mean girl? But she didn't. She came to me. She said, the weird thing is I know she'd be a terrible friend. I know how this is going to end, and I want to be her friend anyway. Now, the Western parent in me wants to go, oh, well, don't do that because you're going to get yourself hurt. I wanted to advise her, right? I wanted to tell her what to do and how to handle it. But there was something in my daughter that was being called to this uncomfortable experience so that she could learn something. So that was the conversation we had instead. I said, well, what would happen if? And ultimately, she decided to become friends with this girl. It ended exactly the way that you think it would end. It was, up in flames and rumors flying and the whole 9 yards. But ultimately, what she walked away with, because she went in with her eyes wide open and she had a safe space at home, never once was there, and I told you so, because I never told her. I said, what does your intuition say? What could you have to gain from this? So she always knew she could come to me and talk through these things. And she had a safe place to process her emotions around the trials that she was experiencing. And as a result, she's even more independent. She trusts her intuition even more. She has the healthiest friendships she's ever had yet, and will probably still get healthier through, future experiences. So we don't want to be too harsh on parents who were told that this is the one right way, because a lot of that traditional wisdom is changing. And without that emotional intelligence in ourselves, it's really hard to deliver that space for our kids.
Yes, that's very powerful, right? As I was thinking, as you say that with your daughter, right? The best way to learn about ourselves and other people is through relationships, right? Because I realized my philosophy has changed, where I used to be like, in order to heal yourself, you need to be able to heal the part of yourself to be able to have a relationship. But as I got into a relationship, I felt that that you need to go into a relationship, because that is where all your unconscious, your thoughts patterns, you like you didn't know that you had before, because that was me. And I was like, okay, I think that you see it because you start to see a pattern. And I was like, okay, so thank you so much for that. And I asked one question where I read the female brain of the book. It was very fascinating. I love that book. When you have your first child, but before you had your first child, and then after, did your brain changes and you care more and become nurtured as you become a mother?
Yes, and that was very much a conscious choice. I don't know that that's necessarily something that happens by virtue of the hormonal changes that happen when you become a mother. I think we kind of have this impression that when a child is laid in your arms that you've just given birth to, that all of this maternal stuff wells up inside of you. And for some women, that's absolutely true. I was very lucky. A lot of that did come to me. I've also known women and worked with women who that was a struggle. All they could feel was the fear. All they could feel was their projection of their own limited sense of self-worth, and immediately felt resentment toward this life that was going to need from them what they didn't feel they could even give to themselves. So there is something that developed in me over time. I've always considered forgiveness my superpower. it's like my superpower since being a mom, right? There's a lot you learn to let go because it's not personal. They're not out to hurt your feelings. They're not out to take anything from you. They're just these little beings trying to exist in the world and make sense of it just like you are, but with a whole heck of a lot less tools to do it with. So that anything that developed in me from a nurturing standpoint came from the conscious practice in myself to continue to let go. Because let me tell you, Johnny, it feels personal sometimes when you've told your kids exactly what pushes your buttons and you've asked them specifically not to do those things over and over and over again, and they are so impulsive and they can't self-monitor their behavior and all of this. It's not developed, but they keep doing it. It feels like a screw you mom. It feels like a I don't care about you mom kind of thing. And the exercise in nurturing comes when you go, they're not ready. Developmentally, that's not, I'm expecting too much. This is on me to become more nurturing. This is on me to become more forgiving. And then keep having those conversations with your kids as they grow older. And look, I mean, ultimately, as parents, we give our kids one menu, choose any of these options, these values, these ideals, this idea of professionalism, you choose this. But their friends are giving them another menu. The world is giving them another menu. The school, the police, the media, the movies, the games, and they've got ultimately this smorgasbord to choose from. No matter how much you invest in your children, ultimately they choose. Your kids' path is your kids' path. And the more you can show up for yourself and heal your own wounds through this process when they don't choose your way, the more available you are to be there for them when they do want to choose it or they are regretful and there is healing to do back into that nurturing space that you mentioned.
That's very powerful. And I was thinking back when, we as adults, we throw this common sense too much. I remember the reason why I say that because I had an old manager. He was really cool. And I didn't know how to close the blinders or whatever the thing for the restaurants. And he said, "Oh, it's common sense." But the thing is, common sense is you gain with experience. You can't say it like that. And too many people throw it out. You can't say people have common sense.
Right. Yeah. Farmers who grew up on farms and they do the same thing every day and now they're, 30, 40, 50 years old. It's common sense to them because that's the life that they know. But you take a city slicker and put them on a farm, and what is common sense to the city slicker doesn't apply to the common sense of the farm. There's nothing in that environment that is common sense. There's nothing in there that says, well, I should have known better. And I think that's one of the greatest ways we do a disservice to ourselves and certainly to our children. And to the point you made earlier, to any relationship we're in, when we operate from the assumption that other people should know everything we know, or at least in the same way that we know it, we immediately bring dysfunction to a relationship when we have that expectation.
That is so powerful. And also, I wanted to ask you because when I was growing up, I wasn't aware about these things, and when you mentioned about the brain hasn't developed till maybe 22, 25. And you are absolutely right. And I don't remember any sense of awareness about I remember when I was growing up, until when I hit 2013, I became aware, of course, but I wasn't aware. Within myself, I wouldn't understand why am I acting this way. And, I was going through a time where, of course, I get depressed and all that. Well, and then you develop your awareness and we gain experience, right? As you say. Very interesting. Now, how do you deal with your kid, you're scared sometime of your kids being harmed, or how do you deal with that one? Because I know a lot of parents deal with that too.
Yeah. That's not a new phenomenon. We like to think of, these times being the most dangerous times we've ever lived in. And every generation before us has thought the same thing. And, there's proof, certainly we can point to a lot of different things. There's also proof to the contrary. Violent crimes are actually at the lowest they've ever been since the 1960s. We have a greater degree of human trafficking we want to be aware of, and we have a greater degree of peer support as well. Kids kind of looking out for each other and traveling in packs and peer-to-peer counseling and support and things too. So both of those things being true, I think anytime we as parents begin to look at our fear as the absolute truth, we are then modeling and teaching our children to, number one, focus on fear, and number two, that is the only potential truth for them. Now, I happen to use, and you can find it in my book, Fail to Win. It's 4 simple principles to get you out of your own way. There's an exercise in there called the body compass, and it actually comes from another fantastic life coach. Her name is Martha Beck. She developed the tool, and it's really about getting in tune with your deepest wisdom and your best intuition. So there have been plenty of times that the mother bear that wants to keep my kids safe and protect them from all harm was like, oh no, you can't do that. I don't want you doing that. But when I tune into my deeper wisdom, there's another message there. Even just the example I gave you, I didn't want my daughter to feel emotional harm or social harm from this mean girl. Everything in me as a mom wanted to protect her from that. But when I go in there and I tap into everything in me that is wise and higher minded, there was another opportunity to be accessed there. So I highly recommend that whatever parents use to tap into something that is bigger than themselves and find wisdom from that place, not what you think you know is right. Because the moment you're pros and conning or you're all in your headspace, you're in your limited mind. You want to be making decisions from your expansive mind, because the opposite's been true too before, where the mom in me was like, oh yeah, that should be fine. But the second I tune into that deepest wisdom, I'm like, no, there's something there that says no. And the interesting thing is, my kids have never argued with my deeper wisdom. They'll argue with my pros and cons, my backs and forths, they'll argue with that because that's just a negotiation. But when I say, nope, that inner wisdom's telling me no, they've never once argued with it. And we've never had massive, detrimental experiences as a result. So my take on the whole thing is you can't protect your kids from everything. There's a lot of pain and hardship that will actually grow them, that if you try to protect them from it, they're not going to learn their lessons at a low cost. They'll learn them later in life at a higher cost. And really all of this discomfort we experience as parents is an opportunity, again, for us to tune in and use a different place within our well-being that can inform the decision that will ultimately help their well-being. Not about comfortable, it's about wise.
That's very powerful. What's the coach name you mentioned?
Martha Beck.
Okay.
And she wrote Finding Your Way in a Wild New World and Steering by Starlight. I think that the body compass comes from her Steering by Starlight. And I use it. I use this compass for every decision. I never pros and cons anything anymore. Decision making is easy. I don't necessarily like the outcome because sometimes I'm guided to do the thing that's hard for me. As you know, it's not easy going to the same person that has said no, 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 right? Like sometimes a thing that we're meant to do, it was never meant to be comfortable. It's meant to be an opportunity for development. And tuning into that is paramount if you're the person who wants to continually elevate yourself.
That's very powerful, like you said, because I do want to interview her. Well, actually, technically, I want to interview everybody, because I think that it's for me to understand people, right? Because people say that in order to understand yourself, you must, go within. But people are more complicated than that, because every interview, every interaction, I know there's a similar, because I want to see that there's one, right? Martial artists like yourself, for, life coach, and to be able to navigate, to be able to understand people much more better, right? And also, why is it when you say strong woman, can you paraphrase? Because you said that in the beginning, you said you want to help strong women, right? Can you say that again? so I can.
Yes, I specialize in helping strong women tame their inner hot mess, because here's what happens in at least the Western culture that I know. We are taught to be achievement oriented. We are taught you pick yourself up by your bootstraps. We are taught that, you know, if you're feeling pain, you certainly don't go investigate it because it's going to slow down all of your progress toward your achievement. We're taught all of these things that sort of bury our doubts and bury our fears, and this nuanced thing goes on in the underbelly of our consciousness as we're becoming stronger and stronger to the outward world, you know, to the outer world. And our outer life can actually look quite successful. And yet, every time we want to elevate ourselves professionally, personally, emotionally, whatever, we constantly have these things inside of us, these self-sabotaging things that are going on, these habits that are going on that are informed by all of that stuff we suppressed way back, right? When we just picked ourselves up by our bootstraps, when we just sucked it up, and we just got through. Because everything that is within us that makes us human, our very humanity, those elements, they need to be heard, they need to be developed, they need to be grown and nurtured just like the physical body does. And if they have not gotten the opportunity to do that, they will get louder over time. The difference is it goes from maybe an adolescence of, oh gosh, you know, am I cute enough in my little pictures for my school, to, you know, I can't go for that position because if I don't look the part, nobody's going to take me seriously, and I happen to have 20 extra pounds. Like, it turns into this other thing, this self-sabotaging thing when it's not been dealt with. Fact of the matter is, if you're qualified, you'll get the position. But if you have this self-talk that's keeping you from putting yourself forward for that position, or even vying for it in the context of parenting, if you've got anything in yourself that doesn't want to be called out as a bad parent, or you got your information wrong, and gosh darn it, you're supposed to listen to me because I'm the parent, then you are missing the opportunity to develop yourself, because your old voices never got heard. That old work never got completed. So before you know it, all of your insecurities are being reflected back to you. In the case of you, they're being reflected back to you by the people you interview. You see humanity and professional development and personal development in the faces that you interview. For a parent, they're seeing all of those things reflected back to them in the kid who behaves like them, fights like them, resolves or doesn't resolve issues like them. And a lot of times they don't like what they see because that was the stuff they tried to bury way back when. So that's what I mean about that inner hot mess, that those nuanced little voices that keep us from embracing failure and really getting all the way through that failure to success.
That's very powerful, as you said. But what make you want to empower?
The thing that I did notice is it was women coming to me going, something's got to change. Something inside of me has got to change. And when men came to me, they were constantly asking, how do I get others to change? How do I make them change? How do I make them show up? And that was when I realized that there's a certain level of readiness in the women that were coming to me that were willing to look at themselves. Whereas men were still men were actually getting more and more frustrated. They couldn't get the women in their lives to do what they wanted, that they couldn't get their boss to do what they wanted. They couldn't get their kids to do what they wanted. So that was the reason why I began to niche, because I found that the language I spoke was a language women could hear.
That is very powerful. Thank you so much for that. Because I noticed that every time I do interviews, women are more in tune with nature, with themselves, but guys are often not. Like, it's very, like, I've seen it. Like, it's a pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like crazy. Like, wow.
Well, you know, it's an interesting phenomenon, because I feel like women for several decades now, when life sort of had its gender roles and everybody sort of knew their place, a lot of people make the argument that life was simpler back then. And in a sense it was, because everybody knew exactly how to show up, right? Whether they were happy there or liked it there or wanted more or less was almost irrelevant, because at least the rules were clear. Well, when women began to show up more and more into the workplace, you look at post-World War II, when women had been working in the factories and they'd been making their own living, they had a sense of fulfillment and purpose in a day that wasn't just tied to motherhood. there was a certain amount of liberation in that women weren't willing to give up. But the one thing women had to do was figure out how to make it in a man's world. So women took this ultra feminine existence where we'd learn to be kind of subtle with our power and gentle with our words. And even if we were kind of getting our way, it always sort of came behind this wall of manipulation because we had to, because we weren't just given an equal voice in a partnership, in marriage, or even in society. So when we came into a man's world and we're like, oh, out here we've got to be blunt and we've got to be bold, and oh wait, now I'm the bitch if I'm those things, but he's okay, you know, like all of these things that women have been for the past several decades, we've been experimenting that sway from ultra feminine energy to finding power in masculine energy, and then hopefully finding some place in between where we can feel full in both realms. Men haven't had that opportunity. Men were hyper masculinized, saw women start to encroach in on that masculine space, didn't know what to do with it, and haven't really been given permission to swing themselves to the middle and go, okay, so if they're coming into our space, what's available for us in this space? How can we be better fathers and create safe emotional space? That question's not going to come up at all in a man's awareness who hasn't even asked himself how he can be safe in his own emotional space. You ask a man, you know, how do you feel about your promotion? He's going to give you a bunch of logistics. It's going to be great. There's going to be more pay. I should get a little more vacation time. I've got my tenure now. It's going to be but that's not the question you ask. The question you ask is, how do you feel about it? Where you ask a woman, because she's had both, she's going to say all those same things. She's looking forward to the logistics. She's also going to say, it's so nice to be recognized. I feel like I've worked really hard for this and I deserve this, right? So men are capable of those insights and that fuller, more robust personal development. I think we're going to see more of it in this next generation, your generation, as the conversation begins to shift and they get permission from men primarily to be vulnerable and explore those things and look at, you know, if I'm grateful that I now have been acknowledged in the workplace, does that mean that at some point I was resentful that I wasn't? And if that's the case, am I a person who needs, you know, strokes to feel good about myself? You know, these are things that men haven't really been given permission to process because it was just their job to go do stuff. Just go do it. So, and that's true in parenting, to bring it back to the topic. It's true in parenting. And I think fatherhood is one of those things. If a father really wants to be present for his child, he's going to make sure that includes that emotional component.
That's so powerful as you say it like that. Because I feel like, because I interviewed one of the martial artists, Kung Fu master, Wing Chun. Because usually, I think it's only the Western world that is more masculine, while the Asian world is more feminine. Like, that's why they do Tai Chi and all that. They're feminine. Mm-hmm. And you're right. People, because I hear all the time, I remember back when I was in boarding school and I was hurting from this, from a girl, right? It's had to do with like a lot of things, complicated things. And she broke my heart and I cried, right? My roommate said, man, you're a man, you're a boy, you're not supposed to cry. But you know what? I cry in front of, I cry in front of him, I cry. It doesn't matter. I think that people don't understand that crying is okay. It's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And imagine when you can be comfortable in that in yourself, how you offer that as a parent to a child who all he or she has is emotions. Like you said, there's no such thing as common sense. And like I said, they don't have coping mechanisms for this stuff. All they know is that pain. So when you can create a safe space for them to express that at its bare bones minimum, then you create the safe space for that next level, which is, okay, we're going to process this. Yes, you're sad, and you're also capable. And what else do you have? And let them do that exploring and let them look at their own capabilities, the other friends they have available to them, their own tenacity and resiliency. When we create that safe emotional space, our child can safely become who they were wired to be, as opposed to hating themselves and becoming what you want them to be, or hating you and becoming what they want to be anyway.
That is very powerful. Thank you so much for your time. Where can we find you online or offline?
Oh, I'd love it if you guys would find me at triffanyhammond.com/blog. There's a bunch of articles on there. I'd love comments. That'd be great. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/Triffany Hammond LLC, and Twitter, Triffany Hammond, and Instagram, Triffany Hammond. So just come look for me. And honestly, you can Google me. There's not many Triffanys out there. So just make sure you get that R in there. And we can definitely connect. I'm happy to talk to anybody. If you have follow-up questions here, or leave comments, tag me on YouTube. I'll come over and answer the comments. And I think the more we can keep a dialogue going about, we started off in a conversation about how we're raising children, and not surprisingly, we ended up kind of in a conversation about how to raise ourselves. And that's a conversation that is going to become more valuable as we fill it up with questions and comments and a dialogue between Johnny and me and you. So I would love it if people would reach out and be a part of this discussion. I think it's paramount to the development we're trying to do as human beings in this country and on this planet.
Yeah, that's what you said is very true, because I think that's why I don't like yeah, I found my way of doing an interview, as you can see, right? I found my way, because I try to watch Larry King to do it. I try to watch a Walter, what was it, Barbara Walter.
Barbara Walters.
Yeah, and I try to do what was it, Lewis House. I try to watch what's his name, what's their name? I can't remember, but I saw one of the interview I didn't like, where he was asking, Mitchell Kaku. He's a famous, I forgot what famous. He's good at like space and stuff like that. And
Okay.
they were asking like questions, and they're like rapid fire, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
Because you can't connect. You can't connect with the person like that.
Right.
And out of all these interviews, I would like to ask you: does it make you comfortable?
Does it make me uncomfortable?
No, make you comfortable.
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like when there's an organic conversation going on, and people aren't either trying to come up with their first response or trying to choose every single word, I feel like when there's actual dialogue, we can get to some of the nuanced layers we need to get to. Because as concerned as we are as Westerners about end results and data and just bottom line me, the true answers that are going to elevate us are never in the data. They're not. They're in the interpretation of the data. And then even further, they're in how we respond to that interpretation and the action items we take upon ourselves to react to that interpretation. So, I mean, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And I feel like this ability to have a conversation and share ideas is much more helpful to an audience than just, what does Triffany think? I love the fact that you shared some of your own experience and your sister's experience, and really even patted yourself back patted yourself on the back about even some of your own progress. Because what you're doing in being an interviewer like that is you're giving people permission to acknowledge what works, embrace what doesn't, and just continue to improve over time with that grace as a part of the structure. So I like it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like, from the first time we did an interview, because I would like to see my own progress. Because how, when you look back, what it looked like. Like, I want to actually on this see. Because
I feel like there's much more of a natural flow. I mean, we didn't come prepared with any questions today, you and I. We just said, hey, let's talk about parenting. And you're clearly much more comfortable in your skin. There is a piece in you now that you're willing to just let it be what it's going to be, rather than like, how do I get this perfect? How do I make sure it all works? And that speaks to everybody, because now you're being, rather than being an interviewer, you're being a human who happens to be interviewing someone. So
yeah.
I think that's probably the greatest advance I've seen in your progress. It's remarkable.
Yes, thank you. Because I noticed that if if I just ask a bunch of questions, they wouldn't connect. Because what I'm trying to show to people is that we're all human beings and that we all like to be connected with. I don't care who it is, from a famous martial artist to a best-selling author to a life coach. I don't care what it is, right? They're all at the core. People like to be heard. People would like to be related to. I don't care what they say. People like to be able to say, "Wow, this guy really care about what I have to say. He let me, connect. And that's why I know this because it had been like every time when I interview people, they said I make them feel comfortable, right? And I was
I
like,
agree with that.
and I was like, why? Because the other person said the person that interviewed them didn't make them feel comfortable. That's why I don't do intro. That's why I don't. It's people don't see it the word. You know how like people do intro like of the body of the author. I used to do that until I realized I let them intro themselves because it gave me snippet of what I can like interpret in their interest. Otherwise, because I wouldn't. And I like to do novelty for interview. I think that's much more better than people say you got to research this person. It's research, yes, but I like novelty at play because it helped me navigate something we can expand.
Well,
That's
what you're
all.
talking about is a fail to win concept at its core, which is really to like let the moment be what the moment's going to be. We can try to manufacture a specific result, and sometimes we might manage to get it. But if we're going to get this sense of like perfection, it's going to come multiple takes, a lot of editing. People are going to have to like repeat themselves, and maybe it's not going to come off as authentic, and all these other things to get that perfect interview. And rather than just say, "Hey, let's just have a conversation, you and I." Then whatever comes out of the conversation, and we didn't even just talk about specifically parenting. Parenting was where we started, but that's not where we ended up. And because you could stay and I could stay flexible to the movement of that conversation, someone out there who started off thinking, how do I get my child to fill in the blank, ended up going, how do I get myself to fill in the blank, right? Because we allowed this to morph and shift instead of try to pack it all into one specific idea of the right interview in this instance. So yeah, I think you're onto something here, Johnny. You're doing it.
Yeah, because I remember I was with my friend Sunday because I got scared, right? I was like, usually I like the conversation to flow because that's where I notice the patterns of people because uh, these interviews is not just the interview; it's to be able to study people. I know that's wrong, but because people say
It can
you
be both.
interview, yeah, yes, because I got kind of scared, right? My friend, because I haven't seen her for a long time, she's like, "Oh, we're all talking about you, right? All this time we talk about you." I was like, "Hold on, man. I'm an interviewer. I'm good at like making, not making people, but people are comfortable talking like a lot to me, right?" And I said, "What? What do you mean? I thought we were talking about you too." So and I got scared, right? But she didn't at that time. She didn't notice that when she was talking, I have a glance of herself. That's why I think that people don't understand that when they're comfortable, they have not become aware of that. You're actually talking about yourself, whether Twitter or Facebook, where you're tweeting, you're actually expressing who you are. So I think that,
Absolutely.
oh, that scared me. I was like, what do you mean? But thank you so but
Well,
thank
and
you
even
so much.
that's good feedback because if that even for a second makes you look back and go, are these interviews on equal footing? Am I giving, equal time for both sides of a conversation? One of my biggest frustrations, I love so much of what Oprah does in the self-help and personal empowerment space. And I have a really hard time watching her as an interviewer because at least when I used to try to watch her, there was a lot of interrupting. People would be on a roll and they'd be in there, in that groove. They'd be ideating and sharing ideas, and she'd get excited, which was great. I mean, I love that. But she would interrupt with her own ideas on it. And I was like, oh, but I know how you feel. I want to know how this person I've never heard talk before feels, right? So even getting that feedback and being able to go back and look, and you can say, ooh, did I do that? Is there an inequity there? I think all of that is going to help you. Whether she was right or wrong about you talking about yourself a lot is almost irrelevant because it helps you shift your lens toward that direction for a minute to see, was this even a goal of mine to make sure I talk about the other person 80% of the time, or should it be a goal, or what, if it is, what does that look like? And, you know, that's, again, that fail to win concept, which is, you know, that might be painful feedback, but where can that help me? And you did it. You went and you looked, and you looked at all of that. So I am watching the time though, and I'm way past the window I need.
Yeah, that's why I was like scared of. That's why I wanted, but we went. Yeah. All right. Okay, guys. Subscribe to my channel. Like my video, and I'll see you after.